part, which is part 1, is called Small Group Scheduling Made Easy. We're going to be talking about one thing that is a conferring teacher's best friend when trying to fit in small group instruction. Number 2, we're going to talk about how you can quickly choose which students you need to meet with in a small group. And number 3, we're going to talk about the 6 things you'll want to have in your weekly conferring schedule and in what order you should schedule it. All right, let's do this. Now, the one thing that is a conferring all-star teacher's best friend when trying to fit in small group instruction, and it is what I like to call the think big, dream bigger conferring mindset. Do you have this? Now, you might be thinking, okay, I think I know what she's talking about, but I need to hear more about this, okay? So let me dig deep into each of these parts because there's 3 parts to this conferring mindset. So the first part is you got to believe it, okay? The second part is dream it. And the third part is be consistent with it. And what I'm talking about is conferring. We have to believe that we can confer with our students. We have to dream what our conferring classroom is going to look like. And then we got to be consistent with it. So let's dig into each one of these steps. So let's talk about believe it. So first we have to think it's possible to fit in small groups into our already busy schedule. I get it. When I was in the classroom, we had so much we had to teach. I was 2nd grade teacher and then I was kindergarten, and I used reading and writing workshop in my classroom and trying to fit in times where I could meet with my students in one-on-one conferences and small groups. It was not an easy thing to do. Okay, but first we have to think it's possible to fit in small groups into our already busy schedule. And then once we think it's possible, we can believe it. So what is the difference between thinking you can do something and believing you can do it? Well, here's an example of thinking. You might use some phrases like, I wonder if I can, or maybe I can, but this might happen, okay? So that's an example of thinking you can do something. Now, here's what believing you can do it. I know I can. There is always a solution. And I will, all right? Do you hear the difference? Okay, so now what could that sound like when we're talking about conferring with our students? So you might say, I think I can meet with all my students at least twice per week. Or I believe I can meet with all my students at least twice per week. I like the second one. How about you? All right. I don't know if you have read any of John Maxwell's books or any of his blog posts or anything, but my family and I, we love John Maxwell. And here is a quote, something that he said that just resonated with me so much. And it says, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? Oh, that's powerful in itself. What would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? Once I had the right mindset about failure, I found myself free to think as big as I wanted. I could imagine huge goals that sounded strange or silly at the outset, but were indeed possible with the right thinking behind them. Oh, I love that quote. Now, we have to be willing to see possibilities instead of limitations when we're thinking about conferring with our students. And this kind of thinking creates options. And guess what? Options are a conferring all-star teacher's best friend because it allows us to show up every day with our weekly conferring schedules with hope. All right, so once we think it's possible, it's a whole lot easier to believe it's possible. Now the things you thought were unchangeable can now be changed. So let me know in the comments, what things do you feel are unchangeable about conferring with your students? I want to hear it because I know I was there, all right? Having X amount of minutes to be able to do conferring or writing workshop or reading workshop if you use that, or the schedule that I was given. I've sometimes felt like that was unchangeable, right? There's all these things that we feel is unchangeable about conferring with students. So let me know in the comments, what things do you feel are unchangeable about conferring with students. All right, let's go to step 2 of the think big, dream bigger conferring mindset. It is dream it, okay? This is something that I ask my students all the time, is especially when I'm introducing reading and writing workshop at the beginning of the year or introducing any type of rules or expectations. I say, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And what does it sound like? Okay. And I'm going to ask you that question. When it comes to dreaming about your conferring classroom, what do you want your conferring classroom to look like, feel like, and sound like? Okay, dream it and dream big. All right. So let me know in the comments, what do you want your conferring classroom to look like, feel like, and sound like? All right. And it's okay if what your dream is not happening right now. All right. That's why I'm glad you're here. We're gonna work on this together. We're gonna get your conferring classroom to look and feel and sound however you want it to be. All right. Here we go. Let me give you a little peek into what my dream was for my conferring classroom. I wanted my students to be risk takers, meaning I wanted them to not be afraid to take on new skills, new strategies. I didn't want them to feel like they couldn't do something or couldn't put this in their writing or couldn't read that book, right? So I wanted them to take risks and be excited about it. Number 2, I wanted them to be independent, right? And we're going to talk about that later in the series, how to build independent readers and writers, because again, that's going to be super important to being able to meet with your students in conferences and small groups. But I wanted my students to not have to rely on me for every little thing during that conferring time. So I wanted them to be independent. Number 3, I wanted them to have high stamina, meaning I wanted them to be able to read and write for long chunks of time, okay? Number 4, I wanted them to be engaged. I wanted them to be excited about what they were reading about or excited about their next writing story and what they were creating. I wanted them to be engaged with what they were doing. And then number 5, I wanted them to be hardworking students, okay? I wanted them to be had good high work ethic and wanted them to create something of high quality, right? Not just fluff, not just, a little bit of here, a little bit of there, right? I wanted them to be hardworking. Next, I wanted to have peer-to-peer learning. Okay. I wanted them to not just learn from me as their teacher, but I wanted them to learn from each other because their students, their peers, their friends, they got a lot of good strategies too that they're really good at, and they can share them with their peers. And so I wanted my conferring classroom to have that peer-to-peer learning. Next, I wanted organization. I don't know about you, but I love me some organization, okay? I like to be organized as the teacher, but I also like my students to be organized as well. I wanted them to know where their reading strategy cards were, where their reader's notebook was, where their writing pieces was, where they can get Post-it notes, pencils, whatever, all the things that we have to manage, right? As a conferring all-star teacher, I wanted them to be organized. I just wanted my classroom to be organized. Next one is excitement, all right? I wanted myself to wake up being excited about what I was going to teach them, but I also wanted my students to be excited about what they were going to learn in the mini lessons or when I was going to meet with them in a conference or a small group. I wanted them to be excited to meet with me and wanted to meet with me, all right? And then next, I wanted them to feel proud about their hard work, about what stories they produced or what new book they read all by themselves. I wanted them to feel proud. And lastly, I love celebrating. All right. I wanted a lot of celebration going on with my students in my classroom. So what is your dream for your conferring classroom? What do you want it to look like, feel like, and sound like? Let me know in the comments. All right. So number 3 is be consistent with it. All right. What does consistency look like for you in your classroom? Now, where it can actually become a reality in your classroom every week. Okay. This is something that's really important because if we set set too high expectation for ourselves and say, we're going to meet with X amount of students every single day or X amount of students every single week. But is that a reality? Can that really be your consistency? Thinking about your students, thinking about the schedule you have, how many minutes you have, things like that. So what does consistency look like for you in your classroom? All right, now let's talk about, here's a little all-star tip for you when it comes to being consistent. I encourage you to try not to compare your consistency to another teacher's consistency, okay? Because we don't know their circumstances or the environment they're in or whatever expectations their school district has put on them, right? We don't know how many minutes of reading time or writing time that they have to be able to confer with students. So try really hard to not compare your consistency to another teacher's consistency, okay? All right, so that is the think big, dream bigger, conferring mindset. Step number 1, believe it. Step number 2, dream it. And step number 3, be consistent with it. All right, so let's dig into our next big goal for tonight, which is how do we create small groups? Well, you got to notice class trends. That is how you're going to be able to create small groups super quick. Okay, so let's go into the 4 steps to notice class trends. Number 1 is goals. Number 2 is skills. Number 3 is strategies. And number 4 is color code. All right, so now let's talk about the difference between goals, skills, and strategies. Okay, let's start with the goals. A goal is something that your students can work toward for several weeks, either more or less, but they're working towards this goal for several weeks. It can include multiple skills. Okay, so that is a goal. Skills are a proficiency or something your students are able to do. Okay. And then strategies are the step-by-step or the how-to that will help your students work toward a skill or a goal. Okay. So that is the difference between goals, skills, and strategies. And these are the things that you're going to want to keep track of to help you notice class trends. Now, I'm going to highly recommend that you have some sort of small group instruction template or conferring template where you can keep track of all your students on one page so you can see them all at a glance, okay? And then you'll be able to keep track of all, like at least the biggest goal that they need right now, and then the skills and strategies that they need. And then the next step will be to color code. So then now you could color, like let's say, for example, let's pick writing, for example. Let's say 4 of your students, you notice on your conferring template or small group instruction template, you notice 4 of your students all need to work on the elaboration goal. So you might highlight elaboration all with a pink highlighter, okay? And that's how you can easily see patterns within your class to help you create small groups really quickly. All right, so the 4 steps is goals. Write down their goals, write down their skills, write down their strategies, and then color code it. All right, now the 6 must-haves for your weekly conferring schedule. All right, so number 1, put your small groups on your schedule first. That is a recommendation, suggestion I tell all of my conferring all-star teachers is schedule your small groups first because then they're most likely going to happen, all right? So small groups go on your schedule first. The next thing you'll put on your schedule is your one-on-one conferences or your individual conferences. Then you can put in partnership time or club time. Then number 4, put in some check-in or follow-up conference times. Number 5, put in some intentional observations. And then number 6, make sure to add some buffer time. All right, so those are the 6 must-haves that you need to have in your weekly conferring schedule and in what order to schedule them to make sure that your schedule is flexible and responsive to what your students need and what they individually need. Like even though they're going to be in a small group, you still can meet their individual needs, which is one thing I love about small group instruction.